F1 Fantasy Tools. What is it exactly, and how does it help us throughout our F1 Fantasy season? Hey guys, Jay here, and this is a quick overview guide of F1 Fantasy Tools. Let's get into it. So F1 Fantasy Tools comes highly recommended by some of the top players and content creators across the globe. For example, Andrew Harris, who is last year's champion, as well as content creators such as Adam from FanAmp, Rob at Formula Fantasy Hub, and Ewan at F1 Fantasy Pole Position, as many others. That being said, to access all the features on F1 Fantasy Tools, you will need to become a patron, which currently stands at €5 a month or whatever your local currency is. But be on the lookout for any discounts. For example, I have a yearly subscription where I'm pretty sure I got a little discount. F1 Fantasy Tools also comes with a whole bunch of different pages, such as Team Calculator, Budget Builder, Live Scoring, Season Summary, Elite Data, Statistics, Team Analyzer, League Analyzer, and Hindsight, all to help you make the best decision every race weekend. First page you'll come across is the Team Calculator, which by default will recommend the best teams around the 100 million budget mark. So right now, the best team is 100.8 million, and it's McLaren, Kick, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Bearman, Ocon, Stroll, which is expected to gain 3.6 million in budget with 239.3 points going by simulations. Now, by default, you'll usually find the weighted average simulation, and this can be adjusted. So if you want the simulation to only take into account, say, the past 2 races, you can simply adjust the sliders to 100% for the last 2 races and move all the other sliders down to 0, which in turn will then adjust the teams accordingly. So now we have McLaren, Kick, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Bearman, Ocon, with 3.6 million budget gain and 339.5 points, going by the simulation. Personally, however, I like to leave the weighted average simulation as it is. You can also adjust the budget. So for example, here it's got 102.2 million, but let's say we've got 115 million. We now have McLaren, Kick, Piastri, Russell, Hulkenberg, Bearman, and Ocon, with a 2.9 million budget gain and 257.8 points expected for the Belgian Grand Prix. Talking of the Belgian Grand Prix, after FP2 and FP3, every race weekend, a wonderful person called Writer will run simulations for the website. And so here we have the early Spa-Francorchamps simulation for the Belgian Grand Prix. And we can now see that we now have McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri, Bearman, HAAS, Lawson, Sainz, with a 0.25 million budget gain and 281 points. If you're thinking of playing a chip, so for example ×3, you can click on that, and again the team will change. As well as the simulations and being able to adjust your budget, let's say for example there's an asset you're not interested in. So here we have Mercedes, who haven't been too great lately. So what you can do is you can simply tick them off, and they won't be taken into account when recommending your teams. You can also do the same for drivers. So if I take out Colapinto, and we now have a team of McLaren, Alpine, Piastri, Antonelli, HAAS, Lawson, Bortoleto. So feel free to play around, looking for only the assets that you're interested in. Finally, if you have a Patreon account, you can link all 3 of your teams, and so you can simply click on your Team 1, Team 2, or Team 3, and it will tell you what your remaining budget is, how many transfers you have, and what your maximum budget is. You can also adjust if you don't want to take any transfer penalties. And then on the left, it will have your current team at the top, and then the recommended teams underneath. Again, if there's an asset you're not interested in, so for example Sonoda, you can simply take them out and it'll adjust accordingly. You can also enter manual teams, and again you can also apply a chip that will recommend the best teams for that chip. We then come on to the budget builder, and this will be the main page that you'll be using. So by default you'll be on the required points simulation. So this will basically tell you how many points an asset needs to gain or lose in value. So if I use the tier A block here on the top left, we can see that we've got round 11, round 12, which are the points that asset scored in those rounds, We've then got negative 0.3, negative 0.1, plus 0.1, and plus 0.3. So these are the price changes. So, for example, if we look at Piastri, if he scores negative 31, he'll lose 0.3 in budget. If he scores negative 30, he'll score 0.1, he'll lose 0.1 in budget. If he scores negative 7, he'll gain 0.1 in budget. And if he scores 16, he'll gain 0.3 in budget. This also tells you how much the asset is currently worth. There are two main things that you're looking for on this page: green and the points. Lighter the green, the less points that asset needs. For example, Hulkenberg currently needs a negative 37 for a 0.6 rise at the Belgian Grand Prix. So the only way that he'll lose in budget is if he DNFs and is disqualified at the same time, which is very unlikely to happen. But in short, negative 37 basically means he's guaranteed to go up 0.6 in budget. The other thing you want to be taking into account here is, in regards to the points, you want to always remember that the older race, so in this case round 11, the points scored will drop off after the next race. So for example, you can see down here, Albon has negative 19 from round 11 and plus 14 from round 12, which means if he does well in Belgium, i.e. the next round, the negative 19 will drop, and then what he'll need to either lose or gain budget will change. If he has a positive result, this will move him up. If he has a negative result, this will move him down. Another example here is Fernando Alonso. His plus 12 from round 11 will drop off after Belgium, so he'll only have a plus 5 plus what he gets in Belgium. So he could drop. That being said, right now at the time of this recording, he only needs a point for 0.2 and 6 for 0.6, so he's actually a good asset for Belgium. Finally, you can also see that next to the driver's name is their current price. So you can work out, regarding your budget, what assets you can afford. That being said, again, after FP2 and FP3, there'll be various simulations by a writer. And so here we've got the early Belgium simulations, and this will then tell you how likely an asset is to hit their target. So in the Tier A drivers, Oscar Piastri is 94% likely to gain 0.3. And in the Tier B drivers, as we've already kind of gone over, Hulkenberg is 99% guaranteed to hit his 0.6 target. It's the same with the constructors. With McLaren and Ferrari, 99% guaranteed to go up in price 0.3. With Kick and HAAS and Aston Martin, 99% likely to hit their target to go up 0.6. This is why it's important to look at the budget builder both before and after the FP sims. The next page is the live scoring page. So if you've got a Patreon account, you've linked your teams, and what this will do is throughout the weekend, you can track how your teams are doing. So you can see here on the right hand side, I've got my 3 teams from the last Grand Prix, which was Silverstone. And we can see here that Team 2 did the best. They got 283 points and went up 3.3 in budget. But the other thing you can do is you can add manual teams. So let's say, for example, I went McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Delermain, and Ocon. With Piastri as my 2 times. I can then compare my team 2 against the alternative team that I may have built. And we can see here that I got 23 points more if I'd gone with Mercedes. Another thing you can do, if there's a chip that you was thinking of playing but didn't play it, you could even give that a try. So for example, I'll go no negative here, and we can see if I'd gone no negative, I would have actually scored more points. I would have got 292 points as opposed to 283. On the left hand side, you'll also see how many points the assets scored and what those points were for. So for example, Hulkenberg scored 48 points and gained 0.6 in budget. most of those points come in from position and positions gained. So 16 points for position gained and 15 points for position. He also got 10 points for driver of the day and 7 points for overtakes. If we scroll down, we can see that HAAS had the worst score at the British Grand Prix. And in the bottom right, it's the same for the constructors. Obviously, the difference here is instead of driver of the day, we have fastest pit stops. And we can see here that Red Bull got 15 points in Silverstone. The next page is a page that a lot of us should probably use more, including myself, and it's the season summary page, where it shows you all your decision making and what impact that has had. Starting off with your transfer impact. So this is my team 1, and we can see here that I've made 27 free transfers and 3 extra transfers, for a total of 30 transfers. The extra transfers are obviously the ones where I've taken a negative 10-point hit. Then next to this and underneath, we have a budget and points impact. So for transfer impact per race, it has a breakdown of how much budget I either gained or lost per race. And it also shows how many points I gained and lost per race based on my transfers. The same applies for the transfer impact overview. So here we can see that throughout the season, across my 30 transfers, I've gained 11.4 million and lost no budget. However, I've gained 320 points, but I've also lost 202 points. Now, I've said this before, a lot of that was Ferrari in China. But in short, what this basically shows is you can have a great budget impact, but it doesn't mean you've got a great points impact, and vice versa. You then have points distributions, which is a breakdown of all the points gained by all different assets that you've picked throughout the season. And we then have positive and negative events. So for positive events, these are things like your fastest laps, your driver of the days, and your fastest pit stops. So how many times you scored points from those events. For me, I only have 18 out of 50. On the right hand side, it has a breakdown in the races. So most of my positive events came from Miami after using Limitless. And we have the overview per event type. So most of my positive points have come from fastest laps. The same then applies for negative events. So these are points that I've lost due to DNFs and disqualifications. So I've lost 200 points due to DNFs and disqualifications. So that's 9 in total out of 78. And again, on the right hand side, we can see what races I got impacted on. Australia and China being the most at 60 points each. The other thing you can do on the left hand side, as well as picking your own teams, you can click on the global #1 ranked team, and you can see what impact they've had across their budget and their points, as well as their points distribution, their positive events, and their negative events. The 5th page is another useful page. It's called the Elite Data page. And this will basically show you across the Global 500 and the Patreon 500 how many teams by percentage have picked various constructors, various drivers, and played various chips at various races. So on the left hand side, we can see that McLaren is currently picked by 100% of teams in the Global and Patreon 500, with Ferrari picked by 94.8% in the Global 500 and 93.8% in the Patreon 500. In terms of drivers, we can see that the most popular asset right now is Alonso, picked by 97% of teams in the Global 500, with 96.8% of teams in the Patreon 500. With Piastri, the top tier A driver, 95.8% picked in the Global 500 and 92.2% picked in the Patreon 500. This also shows you which asset is highly picked as a ×2 driver. In this case, it's Piastri, 93.6% in the Global 500 and 90.5% in the Patreon 500. On the right hand side, we then have the chip usage, which tells you across the Global and Patreon 500 the percentage of teams that used what chip at what race. So in the Global 500, the most used chip was the Limitless chip, 51% at Monaco. And in the Patreon 500, the most used chip was also Limitless at Monaco at 46.3%. The next page is the statistics page, which basically shows you how many points each asset scored at each race for both drivers and constructors. The thing you can do with this page is, let's say for example, you want to know who scored the most points in Miami. You can click on Miami, and we can now see that Piastri and Norris scored the most points for drivers in Miami. If we scroll down and do the same for the constructors, and McLaren got 118 points. The other thing you can do, let's say for example you're only interested in sprint races, you can simply click on the Fantasy Tools Types button, and you can basically take out any qualifying and any races, leaving only sprint race points. And then we can see here, again, if I click on Miami, Tsunoda got the most sprint points with 21 points. Most of the time, however, you're going to be keeping these all on. Most of the time, however, you're going to keep these all on, but one useful one that people like to use is the fastest pit stop points. The next page is the Team Analyzer page. Now, I'll admit I don't really use this page, but it can be very useful. So you can see here, I've got my Team 1, my Team 2, my Team 3, and then we've got the current #1 global ranked team. And what you can do here is compare your team to them, basically. So let me explain. First of all, you've got the round. So this was the British Grand Prix. You've then got your budget gain. So I gained 2.1 million in budget, and I gained 256 points. So this first block is what you gained at the race. You then have your total. So this team currently has 2,447 total points and now has a budget of 119.7 million. Underneath, we've got each asset, what they scored and what they gained in budget or lost in budget. And then a breakdown of the transfers I made and what the difference was in making those decisions. And finally, whether I went up or down in the global rank. What you can then do is look at the #1 global ranked team and compare. So we can see here that they scored 2 more points than my Team 1. They gained 0.6 more budget than me, but their overall budget is less than mine, 116.2 million. And they only made one transfer. They brought in Hulkenberg for Stroll, and that gave them a difference of 20 points and 0 in budget. And you can do this for every round throughout the entire season so far. We then come to the League Analyzer for the Global League, and this shows the top 3 teams from the last Grand Prix. So the top team got 258 points, which we saw a second ago, and then Team 2 and Team 3 got 256 points each. We can also see that the team in second is currently 6 points behind Team 1, with Team 3 currently 4 points behind Team 2. We can also see their budgets and what their budget gains or losses were at the last Grand Prix. We can see what chips they've used and what their assets scored and gained or lost in budget. You can also search the top 500 teams in the Global League. So I'm just going to put in Formula, and we can see here that rank 436 is a team called Formula All-Stars 1. So we click them and we scroll down, and we can now see what their points and budget gains were from the last Grand Prix and what their overall points and budget is, as well as how their assets did in the last race and what chips they've used. Finally, we come to the Hindsight page. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't a page I've looked at yet myself until doing this video, but it's quite interesting. So first of all, you've got the optimal teams from the last Grand Prix. So the most optimal team was actually McLaren, Aston Martin, Hulkenberg's ×2, Piastri, Norris, Stroll and Behrman. It would have cost 121.8 million to build, but would have gained 2.9 million in budget and scored 345 points. Now again, you can take out teams. So for example, if I take out Aston Martin, we can see that, most optimal team would have actually been McLaren and Red Bull. We can also do the same for drivers, so I'm going to take out Gasly. And we can see that we've now got McLaren, Haas, Hulkenberg, Piastri, Norris, Stroll, Alonso. The other thing we can do is click on a chip, so I'm going to click on Limitless. So the most optimal Limitless team would have been McLaren, Red Bull, Hulkenberg, Piastri, Norris, Stroll and Hamilton, scoring 354 points. But more importantly, again, what you can do here, you can see you've got Team 1, Team 2, Team 3. So these are my linked teams, and if I click on Team 1, we now have what my team was before I made transfers and what my team was after I made transfers. And so we can see here that the transfers I made were positive because I gained an extra $1 million in budget and I gained an extra 59 points compared to if I'd kept McLaren and if I'd kept Colapinto. So yeah, there you go guys. That is hopefully a quick overview guide of F1 Fantasy Tools. Let me know if I missed anything down in the comments, but hopefully this will give you a bit of a broader understanding of how it works, and hopefully it will help you throughout the rest of your season. So yeah, all the best for the Belgian Grand Prix, which is the next Grand Prix at the time of this recording. All the best for the rest of the season, and I'll speak to you soon.